theory is only theory, and there's theory versus practice. So you have to put some distance between the knowledge and the playing, because there's a lot of players that said that their knowledge came after the fact. Welcome to Jazz Guitar Lessons, where we help guitarists learn jazz faster, express themselves more fluently, and have fun along the way. My name is Mark, and if you're looking to learn jazz, form better practice habits, and especially if you enjoy a French accent, make sure to subscribe. Hello guys, welcome to this masterclass. My name is Mark from jazzguitarlessons.net, and for this one, it's the sixth and final masterclass. I wanted to do something a little bit different. Maybe you've already watched the previous sessions with Nathan and I where we discussed these topics that, as we said, do not necessarily fit the curriculum of the mastery program or your concierge show. It's like speaking of jazz as a language, like the vocabulary of jazz is one, or of music is one perspective. There's tons of stuff that we've covered. If you haven't, I really highly encourage you check out these other videos that are approximately hour-long discussions, basically, between Nathan and I. Today it's a tiny bit different. It's a primer on theory, or do we say primer? I think I've heard people in the UK say primer. Is it possible? I don't know. I'm French anyways. I'm French-Canadian. So a little bit of a theory overview, a survey of theory, all right? And you see the shot is not necessarily the studio shot with my black background. We have some beautiful natural light coming in. So I want to go over things that I believe as an instructor you should take time to study, and I want to do this today. I took a bunch of notes, and I want to do this today without necessarily going in the deep end, going, as one of my friends would say, into the weeds. We're not going to the weeds. I'm just telling you, well, if you want to learn theory, here's a broad overview of the stuff that matters, and let's get going. And I have my fabulous nylon string to cover the stuff that, in case we need it. And as always, jazz threes. I hope you have jazz threes. The red ones, they sound better. I don't know why the red ones sound better. Maybe it's my boy imagination. All right, so the first thing, a little bit of a caveat. A lot of the students on this website, on and off this website, approach learning jazz almost like a purely theory endeavor, going like, oh, if I finally know all my chords and versions, and if I finally know all these scales, then I will be a jazz player. Just a caveat here is theory is only theory, and there's theory versus practice. So you have to put some distance between the knowledge and the playing, because there's a lot of players that said that their knowledge came after the fact, right? So the language, the playing, the feel for playing that music is more important to overall your performance and how you sound like than understanding everything. Understanding comes in due time, but just a slight caveat. Be mindful that it has to go through your ears. You have to be aware of how it sounds and what's its place in the musical context, more so than just purely understanding dryly on paper, because there's a lot of things you can't understand unless you've been through them. So that's my slight caveat. Don't approach jazz as a purely intellectual endeavor, please. And I think you know enough of my teaching on this website for you not to fall into that trap. Keep learning the techniques, keep learning the songs. So on this website, we provide standards. That's really the way to go for you to become familiar with certain chord progressions, certain idiomatic things we do on guitar, and of course, certain scales and theory. Okay, that's my caveat. That's me being an instructor with a little asterisk signs, right? Just like, well, you know, to take theory with a grain of salt. It's a system that we created to make sense of what we heard, and not vice versa. We didn't come up with the theory first and then start making music from the theory. It's not mathematics, right? It's art. All right, let's get going. Here are a few areas I believe you should cover if you are interested in theory in general. So the first area is how to build scales, how to build a key signature, and how to look at a collection of notes as a key signature. We say it's in a tonality, it's in a key center. Namely, I will use a plain example here. We have the key of C major. It's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, right? So there are 7 notes, and the best way to do that if you want to start small is to look at the distance in between the notes. So namely, if you've never done this, this is a really good place to start. So look at one string, so pick your C here and go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Notice that the C and the D are 2 frets apart, which is 2 half steps, so it's a whole step. Whole step, D, E, whole step, E, F, half step, oh, half steps. F, G, whole step, G, A, whole step, A, B, whole step, and B, C, half step. So you notice there's 2 half steps, so the scale construction for the major scale is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So WWH, WWWH. So if you've never done this, I highly encourage you to check out Harmony 101, which is in your platform right now. All right, so that's scale construction. You will see in certain scores, maybe I have one lying around, do I? Yes, I just happen to have one. Awesome. So you will see these key signature. I'm going to try to put this on camera. See on the right here, you have these 3 sharps after the treble clef, right? And that represents the key of A major. So if you are into building scales, you have to look at the distance in between the notes, and then you have to look at, sorry about the paper, you have to look at the way we alter the notes if we start on a different route so that we have the proper distance. So now we've done C, D, E, F, G, A, B. So if you've never done this, I challenge you to build the F major scale. So we start with an F. But remember, between F and F, you have to have WWH, whole, whole, half, and then WWWH. So you still need that same structure, but you need to name the notes from F to F. So first, and this is really important, first you write F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. And then you will alter the notes within these consecutive letter names so that you get the proper distance in between the notes. Namely, in the key of F, you will need a B flat to make sure that there's the half step in the proper place. So in the key of A major, and I'll challenge you to pause this video and do it, write down on a piece of paper A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. And then look at where you need to put sharp notes so that the structure of half step and whole steps is respected. That's the major scale, right? And you will wind up with 3 sharps, and those are the sharps that you write at the clef. So that's why there's a whole method to the madness. There's a whole way of thinking of key centers as related to their key signatures near the treble clef. That's a classical music thing, right? So that's my first tip, the first step as well. As far as any theory goes, before you even think about chord progressions or chords, whatever, you should have the ability to build scales from the ground up. If you want to take it advanced and do like I did, I was 14. I took Barbara Warham with an M as in mama. That's Royal Conservatory of Music? It's probably a Canadian conservatory of some sort. And it's just a pure dry theory text with exercises. So you fill in your scales, and then you fill in your key signatures, then you fill in your half steps, and then you discover how the minor scales are built, etc., which I will not get into right now, but that would be another step. If you learn your scales, learn the minor scales as their whole step and half step structures. That's really how you do it. Look at harmonic minor. Look at how melodic minor is different from that, and even different than natural minor. After you do that, then the whole modes will just become another pattern of half step and whole steps. That's going to help. If you look at C major, C major contains the same note as D Dorian. Yes, that's right. But then what is the structure of pattern of whole step and half steps in D Dorian? It's the type of stuff you have to uncover. All right, let's move on because I'm spending way too much time on the scales right now. Second topic I wanted to cover. Building chords. So chords, put simply, are when you play 3 or more notes together. You should learn how to build triads. There are 4 kinds of triads: the major, the minor, the diminished, and the augmented triads. And they all have either a minor third in between the notes or a major third. So namely, let's stick to C major because C, right? So C, E, and G. So there's a major third in between C and E, and there's a minor third between E and G. After you learn the structure, you go, that's C minor. Then C diminished. And last one, the C augmented. I won't get into the details of this, but this is how you build those basic basic chords that are found within the scales. Then, of course, you look at the conservatory theory. They will tell you, well, here's a scale, but you can build a triad on each degree. What is the quality of this triad? Well, it depends how it's built and where it's at. So now, not only do you know the scale, meaning you know the distance in between each note, but when you look at 3 notes played consecutively, you know what interval is in between those. So now you're getting your intervals education. We've done this in Harmony 101, by the way. You're getting your intervals education just like for free as you build chords. And then, while you're on that topic, you will learn to recognize the same 3 notes, but maybe have them in a different inversion. So instead of C, E, G, what if I put the C on top and I went E, G, C, right? So that's still C major. It's a C major triad, but it's reverted in another way. There's countless ways of looking at inversions, one of which is looking at which one is the lowest note. Then you might start to look into spread triads, meaning that the notes are not as close as they can. It's like C, E, G, but what if I took that E, but I put it on top here and it's an octave higher? Then instead of sounding, it will sound like, that's a different voicing, not to be confused with inversion. It's still in the root position because it's not an inversion. So inversion is defined as which note is lowest, and there's an amazing blog post on jazzguitarlessons.net about this, by the way. Inversions versus voicings. So inversion is only describing which note is lower. A voicing is telling you about the spread of the note within the voicing itself. All right. So after you know your triads and you've dwelt into the whole inversion paradigm and maybe a bit of voicing, then you have to build your 7th chords. So now, since there's 4 notes, so 1, 3, 5, and 7, there's a wider variety of types of chords that have 7 notes. So in this case, you have C, E, G, and B natural. That's called a C major 7, right? You've seen this on scores and on sheets all the time. But then there's also C7, that's a dominant. So I don't have enough fingers. Welcome to the world of the guitar. You have to reverse this and make it into a bar chord for this to be playable. C minor 7, C minor 7 flat 5, C diminished 7, C dominant 7, sharp 5. There's all these sorts of things. So it's good to just get a rudimentary understanding of what the basic 7 chords are. So that would be the second thing I do to recap the third thing. So to recap the first thing, no, the second thing, yeah. First thing is about scales, then build triads and chords just as a rudimentary understanding of the intervals in between these notes. And by an interval is the degree of distance, right, between notes. And then the third thing I would suggest you take a look at is building progressions. So building progressions is also, is it happening in Harmony 101 or 102? I forget, but it's on your portal. You have access to this material. And also it's important to look at how in the progressions, you don't have a bunch of random chords. You have chords that pertain to a certain key. So there are progressions, and there are, for jazz progressions, at least guide tones. So if you look at the progression of the 3rd and 7th, these degrees of chords, as you go through a progression, they work very well with everything you've seen, Comping 101 and Improv 101, etc. And also, they tend to fall down because tunes move in the cycle of fourths, which is another topic of discussion entirely. So as you learn to build progressions and look at progressions, you will start to identify them as chords that pertain to a key. So the word for this is diatonic. When you say diatonic chords, I'm going to play you the 7 7th chords that are diatonic to the key of C major. For instance, you could do this simply by going C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor, etc. You build all your chords. So those diatonic chords, you then number them with Roman numbers. So 1 is 1 Roman, like I, Roman, right? And 2 is I, then 3 is I, then 4 is IV, Roman, right? So you identify those. And then once you reach, you identify your diatonic chords in the key, you put a number to them. And then you identify a chord progression. So now you can say, what key is that in? Hint, look at the key signature at the top near the treble clef. And The other hint is look at the scale that is used in the melodies. Like, look at that. This tune is in A flat. Oh, it's All the Things You Are. Oh, cool. Then you look at the chords and go, oh, these chords are in the key of A flat, but I built them ahead of time. Okay, so then you might look at the Roman numbers of that progression. And that's where you start to get in the world of cadences. So the basic cadence we call in jazz 2-5-1. So there's a 2 chord, there's a 5 chord, and there's a 1 chord. If you look at the song All the Things You Are, for instance, it's in the key of A flat. And the first chord you play is an F minor. Ah, cool. So F minor is 6. So 6 Roman. So it's 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, 6, 2, 5, 1, 4. It goes in the cycle. So it becomes really really obvious after you've identified your diatonic chords that you start to identify the cadences. So a cadence is, sorry, neck, a bit stiff today. You identify the cadence, so the cadence is where you get the rest point. So 5-1 is like, oh, we're resting. 1 is the point of arrival. So then you identify your cadences. Now you identify the cycle. So this is a really good example of identifying a cycle in All the Things You Are. You go through the cycle for 6, 2, 5, 1, 4. So you're playing 5 chords that pertain to the key of A flat major. A flat major has 7 chords in total, right? But there's 2 that we didn't play because they didn't really fit the progression yet, if you will. So it's like, oh, we're actually, these 5 chords outline pretty much super well the key of A flat major. So after you do this, you realize, oh, they're in a cycle. They appear in the same distance to each other. So that would be called a diatonic cycle. And a diatonic cycle can also be, it pertains to a key, the diatonic, but there's also a chromatic cycle. So a chromatic cycle would be go up a fourth, up a fourth, up a fourth. I'm just going to show you an example, a Joe Pass example. All these dominant chords that are played in the same sequence. So as you build, so to recap again, scales, 2, building chords, then 3, building chord progressions. How do chords move from one to another? And the progressions of chords in the jazz language is really what we've covered and tailored in Harmony 102 and 103. We want to get you to understand how do these chords, there's a chord here and it's happening, and then there's another chord. How do they connect? Why do they happen after one another, right? So that's really the study of what you should be doing. So identifying cycles, diatonic cycles, chromatic, non-diatonic cycles, and then modulations. All the Things You Are is a prime example of this. You're, am I in the right key? Yeah. So you hear, right? You know the song, probably. If you don't, go on YouTube, find it. So we're resting on C major, but all the while I told you these chords are... So we have a 2-5 cadence in C major. So we had 5 chords pertaining to the key of A flat major, A flat, D flat major, all right, and then we go, oh, there's a C major there. So this is called a modulation. It's temporary, but we're going to another key, and we're going to another key by means of using a cadence in that key. So we're using the 2-5-1 cadence in C major, right? So that's a realm of things to explore, to know when, oh, now we're in the B, the bridge section of the song, and we're going to a totally different key. That's really important as well. And what you'll see in Harmony 102 and 103, secondary 5s. So how do you get to that next key? You're going to it through a cadence, so you have to say, well, even though I'm in the key of C major, and then I see a chord that doesn't belong, and it's an E7, I'm like, oh yeah, that E7 is helping me to go to A major. A major does not relate to C major, but that's just how the song is written, right? So those are the tips I have for you for my 3 main. So those are the 3 biggies. If that's all the theory you see, meaning building scales, building chords, and building progressions, you'll be, what's that American expression? You'll be really going to town with that kind of stuff, right? Next, if you are looking to really raise up your game and start to play with people that write music on paper, as in not just like progressions and not just tabs, You may start to read. I will do a short chat about this. Reading music is not for the faint of heart, but it's doable because, people on sax or piano, they don't deal with tabs, they deal with, the music is written. So there's two big components to writing music. There's the pitch component, which is in that direction, and then that horizontal direction is the length of time things are played. Oh, are we going in? Okay, sorry, screensaver. So the time happens in subdivisions. So a quarter note is one beat, an eighth note is half a beat, right? So these things are easily understood. It's doing them on the fly that's pretty challenging. So if you want to go there for your own musical education, it's not the stuff we cover on jazzguitarsons.net, but I recommend you pick, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, where is that book? A Modern Method for Guitar by William Levitt. Leave it, yeah. A Modern Method for Guitar. There's 3 volumes. In volume 1, you start with those are your fingers, and this is the staff, and whatever, and you start with C, and you build your scale and open notes, and it's super easy. But it goes to the deep end as well on deconstructing the guitar with scale positions and chord studies and beautiful voicings. It's a really well done book, to be honest. So that's how I learned to read. There's other means of doing it, but being confronted with these dotted quarters and these 8 notes and these 16, it's really important to read them and to be able to do. It's not really easy. I have to tell you, it's a lifelong process to read well. But that's one of the things you might want to look at. If you do write your own music, and you want to do it in treble clef, not tabs, really staff paper, one of the key crucial lessons to look at written music is the rhythm part. Always ensure that you have a bar and that you can see the middle. There's no way of I can't right now, but I would share my screen with you, show you what I mean. So when you have a bar 4/4, it's really important that you see, quote unquote, beat 3. That is not buried within a note. So if you have a note that's held over beat 3, it's important to have a note here to tie it into the next note. Namely, you would not write a dotted quarter note followed by another dotted quarter notes. Although you see this in jazz, it's not a good example. But write down a quarter note followed by a half note. You don't see, you have your quarter here, your half note here, so it's 2 beats, so you don't see where beat 3 is happening. So whether you're writing in 3/4, 4/4, 16/8 or whatever, or 12/8, it's really important that you see the middle of the bar. It really orients you because we always think in duple. We think in half and half. It really helps. So that's just a little guideline. Remember also to read music that's not been written by guitarists for guitarists if you want to get really good at reading, which I never did, by the way. I never got really good. I got good, but not super good. Anyways, buy books of stuff that's not guitar. Buy the second violin part from a Beethoven symphony, sit down and read it. Yeah, or flute stuff or whatever, doesn't matter. Just be sure that you read things that were not idiomatic to guitar, or else you just wind up reading stuff that's easy on guitar, right? There's a book called Rhythms Complete by Bugs something that I'd also recommend. Snippets of 8 bars, which it shows you a rhythm, then you read in that rhythm, so it's really easy. Or Melodic Rhythm by Bill Levitt as well, which is also another good resource. And the last thing I wanted to tell you is you can practice reading, as in reading, but you can also practice sight reading. And practicing sight reading would be like that. Pick the first violin in that Mozart symphony of sorts, bring it, read it, start a metronome, and you read through. And you don't go back and correct your mistake. You sight read it, and then you're done. You close it. You don't look at it. Sight reading is a different beast than reading, because when you read, you get to go have multiple passes on the same thing until you got it, right? But sight reading is just the art of putting yourself in time, in tempo, with no mercy, just you and the sheet, right? So that's a big component. And where are we? So right now, I'm just going to jolt this down, actually, to have good notes after. So building scales is number 1. Building chords is number 2. Building chord progressions is number 3. Reading music is number 4. And number 5 is learning song forms. So it's really important that not only you play standards, but also you understand that you have, well, certain progressions. They call them standard progressions. Like, Stella by Starlet is a standard progression. Giant Steps is a standard progression. Now, it's really important that you look at the amount of bars and the amount of sections and how songs are structured, because there's a lot of commonalities in between the songs. So I'll give you an example. Rhythm changes. So I Got Rhythm has been used and reused and abused as much as 12-bar blues progression. There's countless 12-bar blues, right? So the rhythm changes, for instance, is an AABA form. And that AABA means that all the A's are pretty much the same. Well, we'd say the first A is slightly different because it's going to repeat A, but the second A and the last A are pretty much similar in ending. And the B section, we call it the bridge, it's contrasting. It goes to a different key. So if you're looking at a song that's not rhythm change, it might still be AABA form. It might be that the A sections are 16 bars instead of 8. That's possible. Another very common form is ABAC. Like you play the A, you have the B, you have the A again, and the C is like the ending. ABAC would be Green Dolphin Street would be a good example. You have songs that are, say like Stella by Starlight, ABC A prime. We say A prime because it resembles how the A is started, but it finishes differently. You see, there's all these kinds of forms that you have to get accustomed with that are macro and not micro in terms of outlook on how chords go to another. So it's much easier to rehearse things when you can break them down and segment them. That's one of my key tips in learning anything, at least. It's divide and conquer. If it's a big chunk, look at the first little thing and then work on this until it makes sense, and then work on each individual part and then put it all together at the end. That's how my brain works, at least. All right. Slowly but surely losing my voice, so let's just move on. So learn forms. Learning forms is really important, not only for learning more songs faster, but also playing with other musicians. People do get lost. Just be really mindful, especially when you're playing AABA forms. People will do AABA, then you're wrapping up, you're going back to A, but there's 2A here. So AA and the B and the A, so think about it. When you do this one, it means you have 3 A's in a row. That messes up people to a point where people often will go AAB, AAB, AAB. You hear this at like college jam sessions. People mess up the form, and that's okay. You have to make those mistakes, but just be mindful of learning your forms correctly. All right. What else? Oh, okay. Number 6. Yeah. One tip I have for you is it's good to be comping like a really good jazz guitarist, learning the chords, learning the guide tones, doing voicings that do not contain the bass note. That's really important, but also walking bass and walking chords. That's a personal experience as well. I saw a guy comping for sax solo. I think it was Rico. You know Rico, the reeds for saxophone? And it was in New York, and there were 3 saxophones. Say, I'm going to demonstrate this Rico reed. This is a hard one. So there were probably 3 sax players just showing off their chops, but also showing how the reeds sounded differently. And like, we need someone. So there's this professional New York cat who just showed up and played chords to a blues. I'm like, oh, I know the blues. But then he started to do all these things, right? The guy certainly did not go like... He did not do that, which is what I would have done at that point. I was like 21. The guy went like, all right, 3, 4. See, I'm doing a little bit of maybe I'm doing walking chords and walking bass. So there's something to be said about becoming a very proficient accompanist that I cover in a few blog posts on this platform, but I don't cover at length in any of the modules. And this thing is just to become a very broad, not just a specialist of chord inversions like on your top strings, but be able to use all of that vocabulary that you have. And walking chords is part of this. Walking bass, so playing. So you can walk chords, but you can walk just a bass and then pluck chords once in a while. There's some of that on the website as well in some of your modules. Probably the chord melody modules, I forget. There's just so much stuff on the website at this point. So become a good accompanist. Just overall, that's the theory of it. And the theory is just learn it. Grab, Randy Vincent's 3-Note Voicing. It's a book. It's on Shure Publishing, SHER, Chuck Shure Publisher. Randy Vincent's book is brilliant because there's a lot of that stuff, like the walking bass, the walking chord style, and it shows you alternatives to comp on blues and on rhythm changes and stuff like that. So that'd be, I know it's supposed to be a theory masterclass, but the point on theory here is like, well, there's a theory to being a good accompanist, which is beyond, the progression does not change. It's the same progression. It's just how you ornament around it. And it's not more flat nines and more this, more that. It's just like being a very smart accompanist and making use of that. So check this out, Randy Vince. All right, number 7. Theory caveat, another caveat. If you start to analyze things in the same way we would analyze a Mozart sonata, and you take blues or gospel or blues or R&B or jazz, it's not going to make sense always. When there's a bluesiness factor to it, when there's a blues scale or whatever, you start to analyze it's like, it doesn't work. But that's totally okay. Because, like, who wants to analyze Tower of Power? It's just like, backbeat, it sounds good. So just be mindful that the theory of things, as far as classical theory, it has certain limitations. And we've employed that old classical system to describe what happened in jazz music. Although, say if you look at the Charlie Parker Omnibook, there's not even phrasing marking. So we didn't even take it to that extent. Like, well, listen to how it sounds and it's written and then grab it. You'll figure out where the phrase starts and phrase ends. Remember the phrasing marking in classical music are telling you when to breathe. So even the violins, like, here's the beginning of a phrase, the end of the phrase. So there's a lot of... it's also how to tell you to slur notes. There's all kinds of sorts of things happening in classical notation, which as jazz guys would go like, yeah, the chord symbol is that, yeah, all right, it's a G major or something, all right. And then, the melody is that, like, so long as it's sort of clear, we'll grab it by ear anyways, because that's how even big bands work. They learn the thing and then like, okay, that's written that way. Now let's just all learn to breathe at the same time. It's more like that, like the Count Basie stuff, right? It's more like that than it is about the paper. So just be mindful. That's my caveat. Whenever you come to analyze and look at a chord progression to a 12-bar blues, say you do the very basic chord progression to 12-bar blues. You have 3 dominant chords. And it's the 1, the 4, and the 5. That's a very basic 12-bar blues. So it's more cultural and idiomatic than it is fitting that concept of how to explain music theory in a broad sense. So just be mindful of that, right? It's just a little caveat. Don't overanalyze blues and jazz to an extent because it's not going to make sense. It doesn't. In functional harmony. So functional harmony is where you have cadences and resolution points, whatever. Although for modern jazz, often these are in there, but they're hidden very with a lot of craft and a lot of wisdom. You still get a resolution to a cadence, but there's a spin and a pivot in a certain other way. So that's just my caveat. And last but not least, and of course now, shameless self-promotion. All of these things are difficult, and especially the number 8 point for this masterclass that I want to cover. And this point is you need to learn the vocabulary of the bebop legends if you want to become a great jazz guitarist. So this is what I do personally with my coaching students, my mentoring students. I work with a handful of people, like literally, not like dozens, and there's just a few people, and I mentor them through my own I would say my secret recipe, but I build for every one of them, I build a blueprint to take their playing to the next level. So speaking of which, if you haven't done so already, feel free to book a call with me. It's totally free of charge, and we'll just get on the phone and just discuss how I can map out a custom plan for you to take your playing to the next level, and see if we could implement my strategy for taking my students to the next level together. It's totally free, so go to nextlevel.jazzguitarlessons.net, nextlevel.jazzguitarlessons.net, book a call, and we'll talk. We'll see how it's going. My students in that side of the program that work with me directly have done 6 to 8 months minimum on the Jazz Guitar Mastery program. So if you're watching this, you're towards the mid of your year in your first year of Mastery program, it means that you're probably a fit for that, depending on how high and how fast you want to take your knowledge. So that ties into my 8th point, which is you want to improvise like a serious jazz guitarist, you will need to go ahead and learn the vocabulary of Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, and the likes. Simply because you will agree with me, if you've been listening to jazz for a certain amount of time, you will hear 2 improvisers, and one of them sounds good but not great, and he's somehow playing all the correct scales and progressions and arpeggios, and the other one sounds like a real jazz player. Chances are, when it tastes like jazz, when it's like, oh yeah, that's jazz, because there's a bebop component to it. All right, so let me just put a bit of historical perspective on this. Bebop is the common era of jazz music. And by common era, I mean not necessarily the golden era, although we could say it's both. The common era in classical music is Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven. So if you hear something and you go, oh, that sounds like classical music, is because there's a part of that classical era. Mozart was born in 1756, I think. So think late 18th century, so 1700s, between 750 and 1800, there's these composers that were born and were prolific: Haydn, Beethoven, Mozart. And also what's interesting is J.S. Bach was passed in 1750. So it's like Bach is like, all right, he encapsulated and formalized and digested and synthesized a language of Baroque music. And that Baroque is a thing of the past. So, Renaissance music and Baroque music and classical music have common points, but certainly the classical era was a departure from that, because it was a departure from Baroque and Renaissance, because it was simpler. It was more, the elegance was in simplicity, and was more tonally oriented. Musicians started to get better at their instrument, at their craft, and the technology started to evolve to build, like clarinets and things like that. So sorry, I digress, because I wouldn't say I'm a history buff, but I like these things. So if you listen to classical and you go, oh, that sounds like classical music, because there's some element of Mozart in there. So if you listen to jazz today, you hear someone improvising and you go, oh, that sounds jazzy, because there's a certain element of Charlie Parker in there. All right, that's my takeaway. So you, in theory, should study that language as well. Bebop is the perfect language to study because it contains everything. It contains all the chromatic variations, melodically, harmonically, a lot of the rhythmic activation, so things are displaced, whatever, and it's a language that's been formalized and adopted and studied by many. Not to discourage you, the theory of it is pretty simple to understand. After you got your 2 5s, got your major and minor scales, yeah, all right. And the difficulty will be in playing that stuff. So in the theory of it, I'd say just after you learned your Summertime and Days of Wine and Roses and Stella by Starlight, go ahead and learn the ornithology and the conformation and the freight train and the oleos and the, too many to Donnelly, all these songs, just because something happened there, right? And I know it's supposed to be a theory masterclass, but as far as becoming a complete jazz guitarist, that's the point where you say, oh, that's a language, and I transcended the language. Like I like to say in my vlogs, it's one thing to be of that language and to master it, but then you need to transcend it to tell a story. Same way an author would need to transcend grammar to tell the story. The story is much more important than which words and which sentence and how the subject and verb were that didn't really matter. That's stylistic, but the story is really important. So that's what you're looking to do as a complete jazz guitarist, is to understand, in theory, on paper, that language, and to really internalize the rhythms, the chord progressions, and the melodic components and the licks and phrases from that era. So I think that's my 8 point, and I will leave it at that. So quick recap. We addressed 8 points in that masterclass. And I'm telling you, those are my suggestions for you to further study to become a completely knowledgeable jazz guitarist. I went over a caveat and I said, well, you have to keep some distance between your knowledge and your playing. Don't fall in the trap of just going through understanding everything. There's parts of it that do not make sense, as I said, my 7th point. All right, so number 1, I said, learn to build your scales, understand the intervallic structure of whole steps and half steps. Number 2, I said, learn to build chords, triads and 7 chords, to learn the intervallic components of building these things vertically. Number 3, I told you, look at chord progressions. So progressions, including your guide tones, identify your diatonic chords, identify the chord cadences. 2-5-1 is an example of a cadence. Chord cycles, diatonic and non-diatonic, modulations to different keys by different means, such as secondary dominance and secondary 2-5s and 2-5-1 interpolation, also known as tonicization. Tonicization, it's like tonicize. Is that a verb? I don't know. So you look at the target chord, you make it your new tonic, and then you aim there through a cadence like a 2-5. That was my 3rd point. 4th point, reading. So that's a bit of theory, but make sure you see the middle of the bar if you're reading or writing any music down. 5, study your forms, the typical forms. AABA, ABAC, ABAB. So just AB, with different lengths of different bars. I forgot about this, so number 5, study Brazilian music, the bossa nova stuff, the Jobim stuff. There's a lot of interesting forms that are like, oh, it's like AABA, but then, oh, the B section is 12 bars. You know, there's also these sorts of things. Number 6, I told you about becoming a broader accompanist. Learn walking bass, learn the theory of it, learn the walking chord style, and just instead of being stuck in, well, you want to become a one-man band, right? You want to be behind a sax player or behind a singer and just be complete on your own. That's the theory of it. Sorry about that. Number 7, just you'll find a lot of places where the theory of music is NA, non-applicable. Blues, gospel, some jazz, R&B music, sometimes pop music. Don't take theory with a grain of salt. Remember that it's a system we built after the fact to understand the stuff we were doing on our instrument that we found sounded good. And number 8, don't forget, study the language of bebop. All right. So that's it for this masterclass. I hope you have enjoyed the series of masterclasses we have on this program, which are, there's 6, right? That's the 6th one, but there's a tremendous amount of knowledge and stuff for you to use, the jam sessions, album. All right, sorry about the cutoff, guys. So don't forget to go back and use your jam sessions, your album deep dives, your 20 modules with your concierge week by week stuff, as well as our inner circle live sessions and all the stuff we have on YouTube and on Facebook and on the vlog. Once again, my name is Mark from jazzguitarlessons.net. You can reach me directly at mark@jazzguitarlessons.net. Send me an email, or you can comment below any of the videos you will find on this platform. On that note, I wish you happy success with your jazz guitar learnings. Keep me posted if you have any questions. I'll see you soon on the website. Take care. Bye.